Love, when tested by time, pain, and distance, doesn't fade, it deepens. The journey of James and to Diep was never paved with ease. It was built through storms, through silence, through the kind of challenges that could break even the strongest hearts. But they endured, together. Because sometimes, difficulties and challenges are not meant to destroy love. They are the very colors that make it more vivid, more unforgettable. And now, as they walk hand in hand again, every scar has turned into a story, every tear into strength, and every trial into a quiet reminder their love is real and it's beautiful. The rain came down hard that evening, washing over the muddy fields and the faded rooftops of the quiet countryside. Diep stood under the wooden porch, arms crossed tightly against her chest, watching the droplets race each other down the bamboo fence. Her hands were calloused from harvesting eggplants all morning, and her heart, though tender, carried the quiet ache of waiting. She had not heard from James in weeks, the man who once knelt beside her, bandaged her scraped knee after a fall in the garden, who whispered promises by the riverbank under starlight, was now gone. Not because he didn't love her, but because the world they lived in was cruel to dreamers. His company had fallen apart. The hydroelectric dam project had failed. His name, once printed proudly on business magazines, was now dragged through newspapers under words like bankruptcy, fraud, and betrayal. But Diep knew the truth. She knew James's heart. And she knew that love isn't proved when everything is perfect. It's proved in the silence, in the waiting, in the choice to stand by someone when the world says walk away. One night, just as she finished selling her last basket of produce in the market, a familiar figure appeared at the end of the dirt road. James. His shirt was wrinkled, his eyes tired, but he smiled softly. Hesitantly, as if asking for permission to come home, she ran to him. No questions, no blame, just arms flung round a man who had fought battles no one else could see. He held her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder as if to say, "I'm still yours if you'll have me." Their love had never been easy. From the day they met him, a wealthy CEO, her a simple village girl, everything had tried to pull them apart. A jealous rival, a manipulative ex, her own doubts, his pride, 1,000 miles of misunderstanding and a million reasons to let go. But they didn't. Because love, real love, is not about perfection. It is about endurance. It's about weathering storms together and trusting that the sun will return. It is about choosing each other again and again, through the noise, through the shadows, through the ache of almost giving up. Years later, when people asked them how they survived everything, James would smile and say, "Our difficulties didn't ruin us. They colored us. They gave our love depth, texture, meaning." And Diep, always with a soft laugh, would add, "If love was a painting, ours wouldn't be plain white. It'd be wild, messy, full of golds and grays, tears and triumphs, and I wouldn't trade it for anything simpler." That night, Diep and James sat beneath the flickering light of an old oil lamp in her family's small kitchen. The scent of freshly steamed rice mingled with the warmth of ginger chicken she had lovingly prepared, his favorite dish. James held his bowl gently, as if afraid he might drop it. His fingers, once used to luxury, were now rough from labor. "I lost everything," he whispered. "The company, my name, even my home. I didn't know if you'd still want me." Diep looked at him, her eyes clear like the surface of a still pond after the rain. "You never lost me," she said softly. "I was never something you could lose." His eyes welled up, and he lowered his head. For the first time in months, he let himself cry, not out of weakness, but out of the overwhelming grace of being seen, accepted, and loved. When he had nothing left to give, they didn't talk much that night. Words weren't needed. The Quiet between them was not emptiness, but a sacred space where healing could begin. In the weeks that followed, James stayed in the village. He worked with local farmers, helped rebuild irrigation systems, and found joy in the simplicity of living close to the land. With Diep beside him, he discovered a new kind of success not measured by stocks or headlines, but by laughter over meals, tired muscles after a long day's work, and the knowledge that he was building something real. Into Diep, she bloomed. No longer just the girl who waited, she became the woman who inspired. She led community efforts, helped women in her village start their own produce businesses, and never once stopped believing that love could transform even the most broken parts of a person. One afternoon, as the golden light of the setting sun filtered through the banana trees, James took her hand while they sat beneath the old fig tree near the edge of the rice fields. "I don't have a ring yet," he said, "but I have a dream, a quiet, simple one. Will you marry me?" Diep. She looked at him, this man who had lost the world, but found himself, and smiled through tears. "Yes," she whispered, "1,000 times yes." A new beginning. The wedding was not grand, but it was deeply beautiful. Held in the heart of Diep's village, beneath a canopy of woven palm leaves and lanterns made from bamboo, neighbors gathered in laughter and song. The air was filled with the aroma of home-cooked dishes, sticky rice wrapped in banana leaves, warm taro soup, sweet mung bean cakes. It wasn't a wedding of silk gowns and chandeliers, but it was one full of sincerity, connection, and quiet joy. James wore a traditional linen shirt, his sleeves rolled up slightly. Diep walked toward him barefoot, in a simple white dye her mother had sewn by hand. Her hair was adorned with tiny jasmine flowers, and her eyes, those steady, soft eyes, shone with peace. As they stood before the village elder, hands clasped, James didn't think about the past. Not the boardrooms, not the betrayals, not the millions lost. All he thought of was the woman in front of him and the promise he was making, not just to love her, but to build a life that mattered, one that honored the earth beneath their feet and the hearts around their table. When they said yes to each other, it wasn't just a vow between two people. It was a quiet rebellion against everything that said love needed perfection. Their love had been tested, and every challenge, every heartbreak, had become the thread that wove their souls closer together. The storm comes again, but life, as always, did not let them rest for long. A month into their marriage, Diep discovered she was pregnant. Joy swept through their home like a fresh wind. Yet at the same time, the region was facing a severe drought. The water systems James had helped build were starting to crack under the pressure of climate changes and blocked funding. One evening, he returned from the fields exhausted. "They've halted all irrigation aid," he told her. "If this continues, our crops, our people will suffer." Diep, now with a soft swell beneath her blouse, placed her hand on his shoulder. "We'll find a way. We always do." James knew she meant it, and so, instead of falling into despair, he began to rally local leaders. He called old contacts who still respected him despite his fall from grace. Diep started recording videos of their farming efforts, posting them online to raise awareness. Slowly, attention grew. Donations trickled in. A university sent a team of engineers to help. Their fight wasn't easy. There were days when James sat in silence, staring at his dirt-covered hands, wondering if he was enough. But then Diep would bring him tea and sit quietly beside him, sometimes placing his hand on her belly, where their child kicked gently, reminding him of what they were building. The message behind it all, through every storm, one truth remained: love was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be patient, to hold on when it's easier to walk away. to choose someone over and over again, especially when the world falls apart. For James and to Diep, difficulties weren't the end of their love story. They were the colors that made their love more vibrant, more honest, and more human. And as they stood one day, watching their fields turn green again, their child cradled between them, they knew their story was just beginning. Life's most beautiful colors are painted through struggles. In a world that often praises perfection and ease, we sometimes forget that the most meaningful things in life are born from difficulty. The story of James and to Diep is not just about love, it is about endurance, growth, and finding light in the darkest corners. James, once a powerful CEO, lost almost everything: his wealth, his reputation, and the certainty he once held in the future. To Diep, a simple village girl with a heart full of quiet strength, stood beside him not because he was rich, but because she believed in the man beneath the title. Together, they faced betrayal, poverty, and the challenges of rebuilding a life from ruins. Yet through every trial, their love did not break, it deepened. This teaches us a powerful lesson. Difficulties are not the end. They are the beginning of true transformation. Challenges force us to grow in ways comfort never could. When James lost his business, he discovered humility and the value of community. When to Diep faced heartbreak, she chose compassion over bitterness. Their love was not made perfect by lack of pain, but by walking through pain hand in hand. In today's fast-paced world, many believe that love must always feel good to be real. But real love is not just about flowers and sweet words, it's about staying when things fall apart. It's about supporting each other in sickness, in failure, and in silence. Love is not tested in the sunshine, it is proven in the storm. James and to Diep's story reminds us that the most beautiful relationships are not the easiest, but the ones that survive. Their struggles became the colors that painted their life, colors of trust, sacrifice, resilience, and hope. So when life becomes difficult, when your path seems filled with stones, remember, those are the very moments shaping the masterpiece of your journey. Let us not fear the challenges that come. Let us welcome them as part of the story that will one day inspire others. Just like James and to Diep, we too can rise not in spite of our hardships, but because of them. And perhaps the greatest truth of all is this: love is a choice we make every day. It is not just found in grand gestures or perfect moments, but in the quiet decisions to forgive when it's hard, to hold on when everything says let go, to believe in each other when no one else does. James could have given up when he faced betrayal and failure. To Diep could have walked away when life became too heavy. But they stayed, not because it was easy, but because their love had roots deeper than the storms above them. Like the strongest trees that bend but do not break, their bond withstood the winds of life because it was watered with loyalty and trust. Their journey reminds us that true love is not about never falling, it's about always rising again. Together, we live in a time where giving up seems easier than staying strong. But stories like theirs remind us that beauty lives in resilience, that even the hardest seasons can lead to the most beautiful blooms. So to anyone walking through difficulty, whether in love, family, work, or life, know this: your story is not over. The challenges you face now may one day become the very reason someone else finds strength. Just like James and to Diep, you can turn hardship into hope and struggle into a story worth telling. Because in the end, love that survives the fire doesn't come out burned, it comes out shining brighter than ever.